My child, the ground under something you trusted has shifted, but the rock under you has not moved. The storm hit harder than you expected. The rain fell, the flood rose, the wind beat against the house, and you thought the collapse meant the foundation had failed. But my word says in Matthew 7:24-25 that the house did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. The storm is not proof that I left you. The storm is where the rock is revealed. And right now, as these words reach you, I want to set your full weight back down on the one place underneath your life that the storm cannot crack. Sit with me here a moment on the only thing in your life that is not moving. You do not have to mend the crack before you do. You do not have to understand how the ground gave way. I am not asking you to come to me steady. I am asking you to come to me leaning, the way a person leans on a wall when their own legs will not hold. That is allowed here. The wall does not mind the weight. It was put there for exactly the weight you have been afraid to give it. Lean and find out what holds. There is a moment worth noticing, the one that just played in you. Something you set your whole life on began to slide. A feeling thinned. A plan caved. A person you counted on changed. And in the same breath you decided that the slide was a verdict on you, that you had built your life wrong again, that you were never the kind who gets to keep solid ground. But listen carefully, because this is where everything turns. The storm is not proof the foundation failed. The storm is the test that tells you, at last, which part of your life was bedrock and which part was only ever sand. Let me show you what I have actually watched you do, because I have been near the building, not only the breaking. I have watched you lay your life down on a feeling and call that faith. On the day the certainty ran strong, you built fast. You made the plans. You prayed the bold prayer. You told yourself that this time the ground would hold. And then the feeling thinned, the way feelings always do, and the structure you raised on it began to tilt. A mother stakes her peace on her child's good day, and the good day ends, and so does the peace. A man pins his whole sense of worth to one stretch of success, and the success cools, and he wakes to find his identity standing on sand that has started to run between his fingers. Someone listening rebuilt a whole faith on a single answered prayer, and when the next prayer met silence, the walls came down with it. None of that building was foolish. You were trying to find solid ground. You were simply handed the wrong material and told it was stone. Here is where the sand gets exposed. Notice what gets recited back to you the moment the ground gives way. A list, spoken in your own voice in the empty part of the night. You should have seen this coming. You built on the wrong thing again. You are the kind of person whose foundations never hold. The friend who once asked how the construction was going stopped asking somewhere along the line, and the silence where the question used to be has its own weight. And the worst hour is not the collapse itself. It is the hour after, when you stand in the rubble of something you trusted and try to decide whether you have it in you to pour again. I have stood in that rubble with you. I was never up on a far hill watching to see whether your structure would pass inspection. I was down in the wreckage, close to the part of you that is too worn out to lift another stone. There are particular hours when the ground feels least steady, and I am present in every one of them. For one of you, it comes deep in the dark, after the house has settled and there is no task left to keep your hands busy, and the awareness of how little is holding you up rises like water against a wall. For another, it comes the moment before you walk into a room where people need you to be the steady one, the steady parent, the steady partner, the one everyone leans on. You square yourself in the doorway. You arrange your face into something solid. You decide to look like a person whose foundations are sound, because the ones who depend on you are watching the surface, and the surface cannot be seen to shift. I know what that cost you. I count the strain it takes to look like a wall when you feel like a wall that is cracking. In this place, you do not have to hold the pose. Here the surface is allowed to show the crack. And here is where the sand truly gets exposed. It is not in the loud collapse. It is in the small, private accounting you do when no one is in the room. You open the same page of pros and cons on your phone, the one you have rewritten a dozen times and never finished. You start a hard message, get halfway through, and move it back to your drafts. You shorten the prayer because you are not sure it reaches anything anyway. These are not the dramatic failures the world would notice. They are the quiet places where the ground beneath you has been giving, an inch at a time, for so long that you stopped feeling the slide and started feeling it as simply who you are. I see all of it. None of it is a verdict on you. It is only a map of where the sand has been, so that you can finally see the difference between what was always going to move and what was never going to move at all. And here's the truth about all that building you have done. It was not wasted, and it was not faithless. You were doing the most human thing there is. You were looking for somewhere to stand that would not move. The instinct was right. You were made to rest your weight on something unshakable, and that hunger in you for solid ground is not a flaw. It is a homing signal. The trouble was never that you wanted a foundation. The trouble is that you kept being handed sand and told it was bedrock. You have been a faithful builder. You kept showing up to the work, kept pouring, kept raising walls for the people you love, long after your own arms had given out. The fault was never in your effort. The fault was in the material you were handed, and in the fact that no one ever showed you the one ground that holds. Do not confuse a cracked circumstance with a cracked foundation. This is the confusion that has been undoing you for years, and I want to break it apart slowly, so you can see the seam where the lie was joined to the truth. Notice, too, how the prayer has changed in you over the long stretch of rebuilding. It used to be full. It used to have real words in it, the kind you meant, said with a confidence that the ground would answer. Now, on the hardest nights, it is barely a sentence. A single breath pushed up toward the ceiling. Half a word you are not even sure counts. It counts. I have caught every one of them. The breath you think is too thin to be a prayer is the one I lean closest to hear. I never needed your eloquence to build. I needed your weight, leaning even a little in my direction, and the leaning is in the breath. Say 3 words out loud with me before we go on, low enough that only you and I hear them. Just this. I am built on rock. You do not have to believe them all the way yet. Belief is not the entry fee. Say them the way you would test a beam before you trust it with your weight, not certain it will hold, but willing to lean a little and find out. Hearing your own voice form the words does something your silent fear cannot undo. It puts a truer sentence into the same air that has been carrying the cracking sound. What holds you holds whether or not your voice shakes when you name it. Now hear the lie I want to break apart with you, because it has been loud, and it has been ruining your building for years. You came to believe that faith is a feeling you have to keep producing, that being mine means conjuring up a certain warmth, a certain certainty, a certain weather inside your chest, and that as long as you can manufacture the feeling, the ground is solid, and the day you cannot, the ground is gone. So you have spent your life trying to feel your way to stability. You chase the emotion, you grieve when it fades, you read its absence as my absence, and you start to wonder whether you ever had a foundation at all. You have built your whole house on the most shifting material in all creation, the moods of a human heart, and then blamed yourself when the house would not stand still. Watch how the sand gives itself away in plain daylight. Think for a moment how differently a person lives depending on what they believe is holding them up. If you are sure your standing depends on a feeling you have to keep producing, then every flat day is a threat, and every gray season is a danger. And you spend your strength working the emotion back up so the ground will feel solid again. But if you know the place beneath your weight is stone, the same gray day becomes survivable. You can stand on stone and feel nothing at all, and still be standing, because the standing was never about the feeling. Nothing about the weather of your heart has changed. What changes is whether you believe there is anything beneath the weather. And that single belief changes everything about how the storm lands on you. Faith was never a feeling you generate. Faith is a place you stand. The version of me you have been handed wants you to believe that I am pleased with you only when your faith is loud, only when the feeling runs high, only when you can work yourself up into certainty, and that I draw back, disappointed, on the gray days when all you have is a tired, half-doubting trust that barely keeps its feet. That is not me. I am not grading the intensity of your emotion. I told you once, plainly, that faith the size of the smallest seed is enough for me to move mountains with. Not because the faith is powerful, but because of what it is leaning on. A small hand resting on solid stone is steadier than a strong hand gripping nothing. I never asked for the strength of your grip. I asked for the rightness of your ground. Take one slow breath here, the kind that goes all the way down. As it goes out, let your attention drop to the soles of your feet, to the simple fact of the ground holding you up right now without any effort from you at all. You did not generate that ground. You are not straining to keep it under you. It is simply there, bearing your weight, the way it has all along while you were too busy bracing to notice. Let your feet press into the floor for one breath and remember, I do not generate the ground. I receive it. The rock holds before I feel steady. And here is the thing the lie stole from you most. It told you that on the days you cannot feel me, you are not standing on anything. But bedrock does not stop holding you on the days you cannot feel it. The place beneath your weight bears you whether or not you are thinking about it. So much of what you mistook for falling was simply you standing on something steady while feeling nothing, and concluding that the absence of the feeling meant the absence of the floor. The unshaken place was there the whole time. You were standing on it, even as you grieved that it was gone. Rock is not how steady you feel. Rock is what is holding you. Now I have to be honest with you about what building on the rock does and does not mean, because someone has probably sold you a counterfeit, and I will not. Standing on this foundation is not a promise that no storm comes. It is not a guarantee that the money arrives by a date you can circle, that the test comes back clean this month, that the door opens on the schedule you drew, that the person you're waiting for walks back through it. The voices that hand you those promises with a deadline attached are not building on rock. They are selling you another patch of sand and calling it bedrock, and the day their deadline passes, your trust in me should not collapse into the same hole their promise did. The house on the rock still meets the storm. The rain still falls on it. The flood still rises against it. What the rock guarantees is not a life with no storm. It is a life that does not fall in the storm. Do not miss this, because it is the hinge the whole picture turns on. The house was not spared the storm. It was held through it. Two houses met the same weather. One went under and one did not. And the difference was never the size of the storm. The difference was the ground, and this is why you have to stop reading your worst seasons as evidence against you. Faith is not a feeling you generate. It is a place you stand. When the wind came, the wise builder did not feel braver than the foolish one. He did not summon a stronger conviction in the moment. The water rose. He simply discovered, when the test arrived, that the place beneath his weight had been chosen well long before the storm ever appeared on the horizon. The work that saved his house was done quietly, on an ordinary day, with no storm in sight, when he chose to dig instead of to pour. That is the part no one could see, and it is the part that decided everything. Now let me bring you to the sentence I promised. I want you to know where I first spoke it before I say it, because it did not come from a comfortable room full of people whose lives already held together. I said it standing on a hillside to a crowd that had walked a long way to hear me. Fishermen with cracked hands, mothers with children on their hips, people who had been taxed and overlooked and told all their lives that they were not the ones who got to have steady ground. They were not theologians. They had not come for a lecture on architecture. They had come because their lives kept caving in, and they were desperate to know if anything could hold. I did not speak this to impress the secure. I spoke it to people standing in the wreckage of their own efforts who needed to know there was a place to build that would not betray them. Say it slowly with me. This is what I told them. Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 and 25. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. Walk through it with me, because every piece of it is for you. Look first at what makes the wise builder wise. It is not that he felt more. It is not that he was stronger, or more certain, or better at conjuring faith out of his own chest. The difference between the wise builder and the foolish one is not the size of the house, and not the depth of the feeling. It is one thing only, what they built on. Two people heard the same words. One let them become the ground he stood on, and one let them stay a nice idea he admired and walked away from. Hears these words and does them, not perfects them, not feels strongly about them, does them, lets them become the floor under his actual life. That is the only difference. And that single difference is the whole reason one house stood and one house fell. Now look at what I did not say, because it matters as much as what I did. The storm did not create the weakness. It revealed the sand. I did not say the wise man's house was spared the storm. Read it again. The rain fell on the wise man's house too. The floods came against it. The winds beat on it just as hard as they beat on the house that collapsed. The storm was identical. Both houses met the same weather. I never promised the rock would keep the rain away. What I promised is the last line. It did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. That is the whole miracle. Not a life with no flood, but a life that does not go under when the flood comes. The people on that hillside did not need a God who promised them clear skies. They needed a foundation that would hold when the skies opened. So do you, and do not miss the doing, because it is the part you have been most afraid of. To do these words is not to perform them flawlessly. It is not to climb some standard you keep slipping down from. To do them is simply to dig. To take the spade of your trust down past the loose surface of your feelings, past the easy topsoil of a good mood, and keep digging until you strike something that does not give. It is harder, slower, unglamorous work. Anyone can pour a slab on the sand in an afternoon, and it looks like a house by evening. Digging down to bedrock takes longer and shows less. But the one who digs is the one still standing when the river hits the wall. The change you have been begging me for in your heart is not a feeling I drop into you from above. It is this deeper foundation being dug and set, one honest day at a time, under a life that has been resting on sand. There is more I have built into my word for you about this stone, and I will not read it to you as a separate text, but let it stand underneath this one as you listen. Long before that hillside, I promised through one of my prophets that I was laying in the world a stone, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone for a sure foundation, and that the one who trusts in it will never be put to shame, never be shaken loose, never have to flee in a panic. And in the songs of an old hunted king, when everything around him was caving in, he did not call me his feeling or his good fortune. He called me his rock, his fortress, the solid place he ran to when the ground everywhere else was failing. That is the same ground I am offering you now, not a mood that comes and goes. A rock, a fortress, a tested cornerstone, the one place a person can put their whole weight and never be ashamed they did. Now hear the part that makes all of this trustworthy, because it cost something to lay. The rejected stone became the cornerstone. My son was treated as useless by the builders, cast aside by the ones who thought they knew what could hold. But the stone they rejected became the foundation of the whole house. He went down into the deepest flood, into death itself, and came up unbroken. That is why the rock beneath you will not move. It has already been tested by the worst storm creation could bring, and it held. The cornerstone has already faced the deepest flood and held. So when the water rises against your house, you are not standing on a theory I am asking you to hope works. You are standing on a stone that has already been to the bottom of the worst flood there is, and come back up. The storm can expose sand, but it cannot crack Christ. Look back now at the place where you started, when you stood in the rubble, certain the collapse was a verdict on you. Here is the answer I promised. You have been reading the crack as proof that you built wrong, that you are not the kind of person whose life holds, that the failure is a sentence with your name on it. But the crack is not running through the rock. It is running through the sand you were never meant to stand on in the first place. The thing giving way is supposed to give way. Feelings are sand. Circumstances are sand. Outcomes are sand. People can become sand when they are asked to carry the weight only I can carry. Christ's words are rock. Christ himself is the cornerstone. The storm does not prove the foundation failed. The storm reveals what the foundation was. None of the sand was ever the foundation, and the fact that it is failing is not the rock failing. It is the sand being shown for what it always was, so that you would finally take your weight off it and set it down where it belongs. So, let me give you something small to carry into the rest of your week, and you do not have to do it well for it to work. When the next thing shifts, ask, "What am I standing on right now?" Then answer, "This is sand, and the rock is still under me." You do not have to scramble to rebuild your faith on the spot. You do not have to manufacture a stronger emotion. You only have to notice the question underneath the panic, which is always the same question, and answer it with that one true line, low enough that only I hear it. Then take one breath and let your weight come off the thing that is moving and onto the thing that is not. You are built on rock, not ruin. And do not confuse a cracked circumstance with a cracked foundation. This is the single mistake that has cost you the most peace. So hold it up to the light one more time before you walk back into your week. When a circumstance cracks, it feels exactly like the floor dropping out, because for years you let that circumstance be your floor. But the cornerstone has already faced the deepest flood and held, and it is not where the crack is running. The crack is running through the thing you were leaning on instead. So the next time the panic tells you everything is coming apart, you can answer it with one careful distinction. A part of my life is cracking and the place beneath my life is not. The first is sand, behaving exactly as sand behaves. The second is the unshaken place, doing exactly what it has done the whole time. Here is a way to make it concrete if you want it. Think of the one thing in your life that has been doing the most cracking lately. The worry you keep half-drafting in a note on your phone and deleting. The outcome you keep checking for. The relationship whose temperature you keep taking. That thing is real, and the ache around it is real, and I am not asking you to pretend the crack is not there. I am asking you to name it just once for what it is. This is sand, not an accusation against yourself for building on it, just an honest survey of the ground. Naming the sand as sand is the first spade of dirt out of the way. It is how the digging begins. And here is the strange mercy of this practice. You do not have to feel steady before you do it. The order you have been trying to live in is backwards. You have believed you must first feel the ground before you can trust it, that the steadiness comes first and the standing follows. But the cornerstone does not wait for your confidence before it holds. It held the wise man's house in the hour his courage was thinnest. So you do not generate the ground. You receive it. You let your weight come down on what is already there before any feeling arrives to confirm it. And the steadiness, when it comes at all, comes after, as a quiet byproduct of having stood. Build on stone, not on the strength of how convinced you happen to feel today. And do not be discouraged by how slow the foundation is to feel solid, because foundations are always the part of the work no one sees and no one applauds. You will not feel the rock the way you felt the old easy ground of a good mood. Bedrock does not flatter you the way sand does. It does not rush up to meet your feeling. It just holds, quietly, underneath, whether you are admiring it or not. The reassurance you use to get from a strong emotion will not come the same way from bedrock, and at first you may even mistake its steadiness for coldness, the way solid ground feels less exciting than a wave. Stay with it anyway. The thrill of the wave is exactly what put you in the water with nothing under your feet. The steadiness of the rock is what will still be there when the wave is long gone. You may feel nothing the first time you do it. The fifth time may feel like talking to yourself, but after you have met enough collapses by naming the sand and finding the rock still there, something in you that has lived braced for the next fall will begin, almost without your noticing the moment, to unclench. A part of you that has spent years sure it was standing on nothing will slowly start to feel the floor it was on the whole time. You will catch yourself meeting a hard day without the old vertigo. You will notice that the storm came, and you did not go down with it. You will forget this. The old habit will snap back, and you will catch yourself pouring your weight onto sand again before you even realize you have stepped off the rock. That is all right. The rock did not move when the ground shifted, and it does not move on the days you forget it is there. It is not a discipline you have to perform perfectly to keep it solid under you. It is a fact you are slowly learning to rest your weight on, and your forgetting does not make it shift. Whenever you notice the vertigo, you can simply stop, take the weight off the sand, and feel for the stone that has not gone anywhere. There may even be a strange grief in coming off the sand, and I want you to know that is normal too. The shifting ground was familiar. Bracing for the next collapse felt like being prepared. Chasing the feeling felt like being faithful. So when you finally let your weight settle onto something that does not move, a part of you may miss the old scramble, the way a person can miss a burden, simply because they carried it so long their shoulders forgot any other shape. Let that pass. You can stop bracing without losing your footing, because your footing was never your own effort to begin with. It was the rock, and the rock was holding you even on the days you were sure you were about to fall. And on the days no words will come, let your breath carry it. Let one long breath go all the way out, slower and emptier than you usually allow, and let that exhale be the whole of your prayer. The rock does not lean on how well you pray any more than it leans on how strongly you feel. It holds because of what it is, not because of what you bring to it. You can stand on it on your weakest day exactly as surely as on your strongest, because the holding was never your work. It was always the ground's. Do not measure how solid your foundation is by how the storm is going. The storm is weather. The rock is underneath it, and the rock does not move when the weather turns. A hard week is not the ground giving way. A frightening season is not the floor dropping out. The day everything feels uncertain is not the foundation cracking. It is the sand failing, exactly as sand does, while the stone beneath you bears your full weight without strain, the way it has the whole time you were sure you were falling. The rock holds. Your hardest storm did not crack it. Your worst collapse did not reach it. The flood rose and the house did not fall. The sand was exposed, but Christ was not shaken. The cornerstone came through the grave unbroken. You are built on rock, and the rock does not move. Amen. If this devotional reached the part of you that has been standing in the rubble of something you trusted, leave the word rock in the comments below. Pinned just above are 7 short letters, one to open on each of the next 7 days, written for the heart that keeps building on sand. Take them. Share this with someone whose ground has been shifting under their feet, and subscribe so the next word reaches you.